breaking and entering, drunk and disorderly, law and order. A former prosecutor and a defence barrister, not your usual pairing. And the result? Conversations about crime and punishment that are guaranteed to get you thinking.
Welcome to Justice Matters, a weekly podcast with Lizzie Green and Jay Merchant. Our episodes are every Monday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Follow us on Instagram at Justice Matters Pod for clips. Enjoy the episode. This episode deals with murder, domestic violence, suicide. Discretion is advised.
Good morning, Jay.
Well, good morning, Liz.
Welcome back.
Thank you very much for having me back.
Oh, it's very good. I'm enjoying this. But so today I wanted to talk about a case that's not particularly recent, but there was this year a Netflix documentary on it. It's the Gabby Petito case.
Yes,
So I think
familiar.
the Netflix documentary was called American Murder.
Could be, yeah.
And so some of my information comes from that, but I've also done, as usual, a lot of reading around
The scholarly
topic.
research, yes.
But the reason I came across it is because, as you would know, coercive control in Queensland becomes a prosecutable offence this month,
Okay.
at the end of this month, May. And we're a little bit late to the party. Other jurisdictions in Australia and internationally have had coercive control as an offence
Okay.
for some time. And so I am preparing to teach it to my students because they need to be across it, because it will be an offence that they could charge. Or that the police can charge. So I thought I would just give an overview of coercive control as an offence.
Yeah, I think it's important because a lot of people, and I'm guilty as well, are not over the legislation yet.
Yeah.
So
I think coercive control as a phrase has definitely become much more common in everyday vernacular. Like it is spoken about. People say coercive control and you have an understanding that it is domestic violence.
okay.
The fact that it's now going to be an offence is huge recognition of the way we have come forward in our understanding of domestic violence. So traditionally, domestic violence would have conjured up images of physical abuse.
It certainly can be physical, yes.
And I think for a long time, that is what people thought. It was spouses being physically assaulted behind closed doors, and back in the day, no one talked about it. It was a
Right.
private matter.
A bit of taboo.
It's evolved, and we know that it can be physical, it can be emotional, it can be financial,
Psychological.
technological. So coercive control recognises the forms of domestic violence that don't fit within other types of categories. So if you are physically abused, you can have an assault charge brought,
Right.
and it is aggravated because it's in a domestic setting.
Okay.
We introduced some years ago the charge of choking or strangulation in a domestic setting,
Yes.
because often those offences didn't leave visible injuries. There wasn't a clear offence beyond a very minor common assault that could be charged, and that charge recognises the seriousness of that offence because it often leads to homicide.
It can.
There is statistics
Yep.
that say there is a huge percentage where the prior act before a homicide was a strangulation.
Okay.
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 I'm just gonna.
I'm gonna leave it at that. I think that, there's more variables to it.
Okay. And now we have coercive control. So what this covers, and I'm looking at the wording of the legislation here. So
Okay.
it's Section 334C of the Criminal Code in Queensland. So you have to be in a domestic relationship that will encompass past and present, intimate partner relationships, wider family relationships, and informal care relationships. The accused engages in a course of conduct that consists of domestic violence on more than one occasion. They intend the course of conduct to coerce or control the other person.
So sorry, on more than one occasion?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
On more than one occasion,
All
yes.
right.
And the course of conduct would, in all the circumstances, be reasonably likely to cause the other person harm, and that harm can be physical, emotional, financial, psychological, or mental, whether temporary or permanent.
Right.
So that's the charge.
Okay.
So we're looking here at an ongoing pattern of behaviour. It will encompass physical and non-physical abuse, and it relates to this idea of a loss of choice and decision-making ability on the part of the victim because they're under this control of the abuser.
Okay.
It is going to be difficult to identify.
I was going to say there is going to be some complexities behind that.
And it's one of my biggest concerns because we have enough trouble establishing proof beyond reasonable doubt, often of physical harm, where there is evidence.
He said, she said, or he said, or
that's
she
right.
said, she said.
And add to that the psychology of domestic violence where victims love their abuser and are reluctant to bring charges and still want the relationship so there's so much at play, even where there is physical evidence that where there is these other forms of abuse occurring.
Often it's not one form of abuse as well. Like there's a
that's
compilation.
True. Yes. So I know that the UK and Wales both introduced this kind of legislation some years ago. 2019, I think, was the first. And so in Wales, they actually did a review last year after 5 years of the legislation. And they have said within 12 months of the legislation coming in, 1,000 cases had been reported with the perpetrators being overwhelmingly men, but only 252 were prosecuted. So just a quarter of complaints resulted in a prosecution. I don't even know how many that resulted in conviction.
Yeah, so it must be a sufficiency of, I'm only foreshadowing a sufficiency of evidence type problem. It's obviously in the public interest, so that's not the issue.
No.
It would be sufficiency of evidence.
That's right. So this report by the Scottish Parliament's Justice Committee said progress on achieving its aims was slow. The system of reporting and going through trial was unremittingly grim for victims of domestic abuse, and more must be done to ensure police officers were trained to recognise these kinds of non-physical manifestations. And so I was researching that, and this Gabby Petito case came up. And I thought, how is this relevant to coercive control? Because as far as I knew, it was a murder case.
Yes.
And obviously murder can have a domestic violence issue, but it seemed unusual to be more of a coercive control. So I had a little look at it. And yes, it is, in fact, a murder case, and it is a horrible case because both the victim and the perpetrator are now deceased, and it's a very tragic tale because they were both very young. But what got me was this one part in there that is relevant to coercive control, and so that's where I'm going to come back to at the end.
I'm looking forward to it.
All right. So Gabby Petito was 22 years old. Her fiancé was a guy called Brian Laundrie, I think is how you say his surname. He was 23. And they had embarked on an adventure to live the #van life. And Gabby was going to have a travel vlog. So
a social media presence.
Yes.
And, I don't know much about it, but certainly the lives that are on camera are different than the lives off camera, perhaps.
And I think that was absolutely the case here. So they first met at high school. They graduated in 2017, just babies when I think about my graduation date. And they began dating in 2019.
Okay.
It was quite a whirlwind romance once it began. So she moved to North Point, Florida from New York to live with him and his family. So he still lived at home.
Still lived at home with mom and dad.
Yes. They did apparently love traveling, national parks, an interest in long drives, which was lucky because they drove from New York to Florida. And they ended up getting engaged in July 2020, so within a year of dating.
All right.
Okay.
So young couple engaged within a year of dating.
And look, I should not be the benchmark, but my husband did wait a whole 6 years before he proposed to me, which I thought was far too long. I think 1 year maybe.
I'm going to go with a no comment on that one.
Now, from some accounts, Gabby didn't necessarily get along perfectly with Brian's family, particularly maybe the mum.
That's common.
Common and tricky when you're living with them.
Oh, I forgot. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. That would add a different level of complexity.
And Gabby's family, meanwhile, thought Brian was nice, a bit quiet, but a little socially awkward perhaps.
Okay, so an introvert versus extrovert type thing? Or?
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe. One of her friends, a girl called Rose, had a bit to say about Gabby and this whole thing. So when I talk about things attributed to her friend, it's this girl called Rose.
Yep.
She said she thought he was nice, but that there was something off about him and that he had a dark side to him. I wonder how much of that is hindsight.
Yeah.
I know. I'm just
reporting.
No, I know. I'm reporting.
I'm thinking at it from a few angles here, and that one is like objection hearsay.
So they get engaged and they make this plan to embark on this 4-month cross-country trip in a van so that Gabby can vlog it, build her social media, and they can indulge their love of touring and national parks and
all that. Yeah,
yes.
That sounds like an adventure.
So she bought a van. And
so she bought a van?
Yep, it's her van. But together they remodeled it to make it livable.
Okay.
And the plan was that it would be about a 4-month trip. Now, she worked various jobs to save up for this. She was a pharmacy technician. She also worked at Taco Bell. And apparently she really loved that job at Taco Bell because of the people who she worked with. And according to various sources, Brian started feeling neglected and became quite possessive of Gabby.
Well, she was away working to pay for the van.
I know.
Somebody has to pay for the van.
I know. He disparaged her job. He called the people she worked with lowlives and apparently called it fucking disgusting that she had become one of them. Not sure what Brian's job was.
He's not a fan of Taco Bell.
No, apparently not. He had this habit of making her feel bad when he felt bad because it was her fault. And Rose, the friend, said that Brian had wanted to make Gabby feel responsible for his emotions.
Really?
Wow. Which I think is classic coercive control.
Well, it's certainly, the thing that comes to mind is misery loves company.
True.
Know, so if you're down, I want to bring somebody down with me.
Yeah, true.
Perhaps,
true.
I don't know.
Anyway, despite all of those issues, a year after their engagement, July 2021, they set off on their adventure.
Okay.
Her YouTube account was called Nomadic Static.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to have a look.
And she had an Instagram account with a profile which read, "Traveling the world in our tiny van, #van life."
It sounds pretty fun.
It does sound fun.
I'd
love to be able to take 4 months off to go do that. So she stayed in good contact with her family and her friends, details and updates of the trip, but all communication with her ended abruptly in about late August of 2021.
So
they hadn't been gone long at all.
Okay.
Yeah. That came from the Northport Police Chief, Todd Garrison. Prior to that ending, in mid-August, her first YouTube video was uploaded, and it was full of images of them smiling and kissing and laughing.
The happy, nurturing couple.
That's right. Now, Gabby had definitely been in regular contact, particularly with her mum, always.
Okay.
And the mum said afterwards that those conversations did seem to reveal more and more tension between Gabby and Brian. And on August 27, Gabby texted her mum, "I'm fine. I convinced Brian to go camp out in the woods so I can have the van to myself. It's what he wants to do anyway. I don't care. He said I could have the van if I paid him." So the mum wrote back and said, "Are you guys breaking up?" And Gabby said, "No, I just said I could make more money as a solo female van lifer. I'm driving to a campsite now." And further texts to her went unanswered.
Yeah, see, that there would be a a stark contrast to, the lead up to that trip. Certainly receiving that text message, the mom must have been thinking something's up.
Yeah. And like a couple of days after this loved up post.
Yeah. Well, all the photos, the videos, the trip, everything they saved up to go. Well, she saved up. He didn't save up, and then to receive that I'm going out on my own type deal.
Yeah.
Would like to think that raised a red flag.
So on August 30, so 3 days later, there was an odd text from Gabby that said, "Can you help Stan? I just keep getting his voicemails and missed calls." Now, Stan was a reference to Gabby's grandfather, who her mother said she had never referred to in that way. And the last communication that day said no service in Yosemite. And so the police believe, and Gabby's family believe, that those texts were not sent by Gabby.
Especially with the grandfather reference, that would be
Odd.
Yeah, especially,
Yes.
yeah. Okay.
So
Well, there's only one person that could send it.
yes, correct. So they knew that she was on her way from Utah and was heading to the Teton Range. Is that how we say that? In Wyoming?
I've never been to Wyoming.
Me
Sorry,
either.
I'm a southern state guy.
Right. But then after not hearing from her or being able to get in touch with her, they reported her missing on September 11.
Okay.
So that was, almost 2 weeks after
Yeah.
the last contact. So they made that report in New York, where they lived, to the Suffolk County Police. And they had also been trying to contact Brian's parents. So they said they'd been texting and trying to call. They thought at an early stage that obviously he must have been missing as well, because no one is contacting them. And Brian's parents didn't respond at all, even when Gabby's parents sent a text saying, "We're so worried, we're going to call the police." There's just no response.
So the parents just sat there without any sort of response to any sort of text message or anything. Well, there's a problem right
from
there.
these frantic parents wondering where their daughter is, and by extension their son.
Well, especially because did she not live with him and that family?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So police, as a result of that missing persons report, went to Brian's home in Northport, and they asked to speak to him. So the dad, I think it was, came to the door. And body-worn camera footage shows Brian's dad saying Brian's inside, but he had nothing to say to them, and they could contact their lawyer if they wanted.
No, I'm going in.
They didn't. They did not go in. Police
didn't leave, did they?
Yeah, they left.
They left.
They left. They did do a little bit more investigation, and the van was parked in the driveway.
So we've got a van parked in the driveway. The partner of
Gabby,
the missing person, is inside of the house, and we just hop in the cruiser and take off?
What they did do was they found out that the van was legally in Gabby's name.
So they
had the authority to take it away for forensic examination, I guess.
Okay.
So that's what they did. Yeah. On September 16, 5 days after Gabby had been reported missing, the family's lawyer read a letter from the family to the media.
How many days, sorry?
5 days after she was reported missing, begging for Brian and his family to help with the investigation. It said, "Please, if you or your family have any decency left, please tell us where Gabby is located. Tell us if we are even looking in the right places. All we want is for Gabby to come home. Please help us make that happen."
I can't get the father's image out of my head of him standing at the porch saying, "Yeah, he's right here. See you later."
That's right. And they didn't respond to that plea for assistance. And then 3 days later, Gabby's body was found in Teton County. So
where they were camping?
Where she'd been heading. Yeah. And that identity was confirmed 2 days later.
Okay.
So the investigation had led police to various different locations, including that Grand Teton National Park. And that was primarily because that was the last place her phone had been used.
Oh, I suppose the cell tower pings and
It was something like 310,000 acres in size, massive. They did an appeal for anyone with potential information to assist, and that surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, but that led to the discovery of another van life blogger who had gone through her own footage and found images of Gabby's van located in Spread Creek in Grand Teton. And that helped them work out where to search, I'm pretty sure.
And maybe a timeline as well.
Yep. And when they found her body, I read a thing that said the investigators believed that the scene had been staged.
Okay.
So I don't know if it was meant to be that she'd been strangled.
Was that she was strangled, was she?
The autopsy said she died of blunt force injuries to the head and neck with manual strangulation, believed to be performed by a human. I don't know who else would have done that. Or maybe that's opposed to suicide.
Right, because that would be
similar,
yeah.
Her time of death was roughly 3 to 4 weeks before her body was found, which matched up with the last contact, that time of the last contact with her family.
With her mom.
Yes. And the preliminary report ruled the manner of death a homicide, but the coroner did not identify Brian as a suspect, although he did refer to Gabby's case at a news conference as only one of many deaths around the country of people who are involved in domestic violence. So the inference was clear.
Oh, absolutely. The van was in the driveway.
Yes. Yes, a huge piece of evidence.
It had to come back from where that vlogger took the video or the photo or whatever in the first place.
I know.
Right.
So they did have an open mind at the start of the investigation, but it did quickly focus on Brian.
Okay.
So Brian, they did their investigations, and he had flown home to Florida from Salt Lake City, Utah on August 17. So this is when she's still in contact with her mum.
Her mum.
It was apparently to get some stuff that he needed and also to empty and close a storage unit he and Gabby had in order to save money on that rental. He flew back to Utah on the 23rd, ostensibly to join Gabby, and it appeared both of them had paid for the flights because they shared expenses.
Okay.
According to the Netflix show, he made a number of phone calls on August 29 to his parents, saying that Gabby was gone and he needed help. The parents said they immediately contacted a lawyer but didn't know any more than that. Didn't ask any questions, just transferred this amount of money to pay for it, but didn't know what it was for.
I mean, I guess I'm trying to think of it objective. I'm struggling. But I guess you want to protect your kids the best way you can, I guess. I don't know. I'm trying to think of something positive.
Jay, I love my children more than life itself.
My mom and dad would take me to the police station.
Same.
Yeah.
Like I could not cover up a wooden murder.
Spoon.
Oh my! I used to have a wooden spoon.
Yeah.
Now, Brian had been given a lift.
Okay.
By two different people.
So this is after the alleged murder or whatever? Or
no, I think leading up to it.
Okay.
So he's come back to join up with Gabby.
Oh, okay.
And so a TikToker, Miranda Baker, said she and her boyfriend picked him up while he was hitchhiking in Wyoming. He said he'd been camping at a site outside Grand Teton National Park, and they drove him as far as Jackson Dam. And then another person picked him up from Jackson Dam and gave him a ride to the Spread Creek dispersed camping area, and that is where Gabby's remains were found. So they both gave evidence that the police thought was very credible. It made sense time-wise and location-wise and all of those sorts of things. Now, the second person who gave him a lift, Brian told her that they had a travel blog, he and Gabby, that she was in their van working on the blog and he'd been hiking for a few days. And that's what she told the FBI he'd told her. She dropped him off before the gate at the entrance. She said she'd offered to take him right in, but he was insistent he get dropped off at the gate and he'd make his own way in. And once he got to Spread Creek.
I mean, she's lucky.
Well, I mean,
the hitchhiker stuff.
Well, but I don't think Brian is like a serial killer.
Okay.
I think it was all about Gabby.
All right. No, I've just got.
Is it not much of a stretch to go from
I don't know.
one to many?
Mean, I don't have anything I can add to that. I'm just thinking there are some nice people out there still picking people up on the side of the road.
Who? Like who? I saw a meme, actually, side note. I saw a meme this week of a sign on the side of the highway that said, do not pick up hitchhikers, dangerous area. And there's a guy hitchhiking with the sign that says, I am not a murderer.
Nice. That's awesome.
Definitely wouldn't be picking him up.
No.
All right. So once he got back to Spread Creek, police believe he created a conversation between Gabby and himself via text on both of their phones.
That's devious.
Devious. To make it look
some
like
next level.
Yeah, so that it looked like she was alive when he got there and talking to him. But they said that the activity was almost instantaneous. So it was like...
Oh, so they'd send a message and then the response would be like next minute.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And he also made a transaction electronically moving $700 from Gabby's account to his own as if she were paying him for something, maybe the van, with a memo reading, "Goodbye, Brian. I'll never ask you for anything again." Probably because she was dead.
Well, that's a good point. But I'm just thinking of like he must have had some solid access to her personal information, her accounts, everything. Yeah. Because it's tough to send money to somebody these days without like authentications and all these things.
And he then returned to the Northport home, his parents' home, on September the 1st.
Dear old dad.
So on the way back, he did use Gabby's debit card to fuel his trip.
Okay, despite the fact that the $750 was the last she'd ever hear from him. And, all right, we're going
to... and so police came back and spoke to Brian's parents on September 17, and they said at that point he'd left on the 13th or the 14th to go camping in the Carlton Reserve. He hadn't taken his phone conveniently. He also hadn't taken his wallet.
Well, see, that doesn't make sense. I mean, who leaves the house without their phone and wallet?
Nobody in this day and age. His parents told police at that point that they were actually concerned for his welfare. And so police did instigate a search for him in the Carlton Reserve, where they found his car parked, but they couldn't locate Brian.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure his parents were involved in the searching as well. So they obviously were concerned.
Yeah.
At that point, he wasn't officially a suspect in Gabby's death or any crime. Like on the 17th, they still hadn't found her body. But there was...
How can he not be a suspect?
Well, there was enormous pressure on him to assist them in locating Gabby.
All right.
Yeah. After Gabby's body was found, they then executed a search warrant at his home. They removed a number of items, including a car. And on September 22, a federal arrest warrant was issued for the arrest of Brian. What do you think it was for?
Oh, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it was for
like for theft or something.
Unauthorized use of Gabby's
the money
debit
or whatever.
Card.
Yeah, that's the only thing. It would be something silly. It's not murder or anything like that.
No, it was for using her debit card.
Yeah.
They then instigated a second search of the nature preserve where he had supposedly gone camping. They used drones, dive teams, bloodhounds. They were having to search through swamplands that were filled with snakes and alligators.
Yeah, no, I've been in that type of area.
Have you?
It's not pleasant.
No.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to do a search in there.
Steer clear of it.
And then, total side note, not relevant really to anything, but did you ever watch Dog the Bounty Hunter?
No,
on television?
I didn't. I can picture him, but I never did watch it.
Such a character. Anyway, he got involved.
Oh, you're kidding.
No. He joined the search for Brian, was seen banging on the screen door of his home, and the family didn't answer and they left. But he said, "We had a lot of requests that I get in on this."
Were they going to bring Ben Matlock in to prosecute it?
I don't know. So hilarious. I wish he was the one who'd found him. Anyway, sadly,
Yeah.
when they did find him. It was on October 20th, 37 days after he'd left home, and his deceased remains and his personal belongings were found in the reserve or at the reserve.
Okay.
Now, that area had been part of the initial search area, so they had done a good job looking for him, but the area at the time they first searched had been submerged due to flooding, and so it wasn't until those waters receded.
Yeah. It's messy. It's marshy. It'll rise and fall. And
the medical evidence was that he had died by a self-inflicted gunshot.
so he shot himself.
Yes. Now, among the personal items found with the body was a notebook, and in January 2022, so a few months later, the FBI revealed it contained written statements by Brian claiming responsibility for Gabby's death. In the letter, he claimed that he put her out of her misery after she had had a bizarre accident and was in unbearable pain, obviously totally inconsistent with the autopsy and cause of death. And then he added, "I knew I couldn't go on without her." There were also letters in the bag, including one stating, "Please do not make life harder for my family. They have lost a son and a daughter."
Okay.
Like protecting his parents in return, I guess. And so, that was officially the end of that matter. They had their perpetrator. He was deceased. The victim had been found. The family had that closure. But when I was reading this, there was one part of the story I haven't told you yet.
Okay.
And that's because it was the bit about coercive control. And it's this, and I know it shouldn't be the focus, but it really was the thing that bothered me the most about this case. And that's because prior to Gabby's death, there had been some, I hate to say it, but, red flags within their relationship.
Yeah, it sounds like it from the one friend saying that there was an uneasy feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
Rose.
I was reading all of this with the thought of coercive control in my mind. So Brian initially seemed like a good guy, certainly not violent, a little bit quiet, that little bit of an introvert. But the relationship with Gabby, once it became romantic, because they'd been friends for some time, was just this whirlwind, that whole love bombing, and they moved in together very quickly and they got engaged very quickly. And I guess that's one of the reasons that it's so difficult with these kinds of abusive relationships, because there's so much positive emotion at the start, and they're
like
showing
a euphoria type deal in their surroundings. They're comfortable, they've got all this support from that one person at that time.
Yes. And so by the time the abusive behaviors emerge, the victim has those feelings of love and is invested in the relationship and has seen all of these positive attributes. And so in their head, they're like, I must be misreading this, or that can't be right, or that's an aberration.
Yeah.
And so that's where it becomes so insidious. And I think that's what happened here.
Okay.
So he showed some signs of controlling behavior. There were text messages in which he complained about her work and the time she spent away from him, including with friends. He called her names in some messages. He appeared jealous of her at times. On one occasion, he took her wallet and ID so she couldn't go out and meet her friend. But they would quickly make up. And it was clear to everyone that Gabby really wanted that relationship to work. Like, she loved Brian.
Right.
And I should say all of those things in isolation could happen in a non-abusive relationship. We're looking
I agree,
at the accumulation.
But cumulative, there's absolutely red flags.
So he also started to isolate her. While she was on board with their decision to drive across the country, she was fully on board with that. It was...
Well, she wanted to do it together.
She wanted to do it together, but it was a way of separating her from her support system. It's just him and her.
In a van. Away from the...
Every day.
The family, the friends.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they were often without cell service, apparently, while they were traveling through Utah. So communications were more infrequent and that sort of thing.
Okay.
And then I read about an incident that occurred on August the 12th.
Okay.
So Moab, or Moab, I'm not sure how you say it, Utah.
It sounds something Utah-narian.
After we did the Toya Accordingly case from Cairns, my friend who lives up there, said you mispronounced a whole lot of things. So
Yes.
apologies to the Cairns people and to the Utah people. But the police were called to respond to an encounter that had been reported between a couple on August 12. So it had been described as a physical fight.
So the reported?
Yep.
Okay.
And I think it was that they saw the male person slapping the female person.
All right.
So when the police arrived, the male and the female both reported they were in love and engaged to be married, and they didn't wish to see anyone charged with the crime. So this is from Officer Eric Pratt. At the officer's suggestion, the couple separated for the night. According to the report, Gabby was described as confused and emotional, and a second officer, Daniel Robbins, wrote in his report, after evaluating the totality of the circumstances, I do not believe the situation escalated to the level of a domestic assault as much as that of a mental health crisis.
I have some problems with that.
Tell me.
All right. Somebody reported to someone, presumably 911, that somebody was hitting someone, and that, in this case, it was the male hitting the female. All right?
I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Yeah. Yes.
So we have a member of the public actually doing a good job in, if you see something, say something.
Yes.
So they did that.
Yep.
And then police show up, and then they take into consideration factors after the fact and say it was a mental health issue.
Yes. And so they had body-worn camera on.
Yep.
And in the body camera footage from an officer who responded to the call, one officer explained that they considered Gabby to be the aggressor and Brian to be the victim. According to the police report, Gabby slapped Brian, who grabbed her face and pushed her back as she pressed upon him and the van.
See, this is the difficult part with domestic violence when you don't see it as an officer. All right? You have to distill different versions. This one is actually fortunate because there was a member, whoever reported it to police, because that's in addition to what you investigate. But police didn't see any of the slapping. All they get is a version of events from the aggrieved and the perpetrator, or vice versa,
Whoever's
and not
which.
knowing whoever's which. But if you're a smooth talker, Liz, you can woo over those police officers,
so
allegedly.
It showed that Gabby was crying.
He wasn't crying, probably.
And when they asked her why she was crying, she said, we've just been fighting this morning some personal issues. They considered Brian the victim, and Gabby, you could see on the video, Gabby's struggling to calm down. Brian's relaxed, almost charismatic. He's joking with the officers, appeared to be quite chummy with the police, even though Gabby is visibly distraught. And the police said, you're the victim of domestic assault. And they took him to a hotel for the night for refuge, and Gabby was left alone on the road in the van.
A number of problems. Can I first just say that I try and take things from the perspective that, we weren't there type deal. But at the same token, from what I'm hearing, I have a significant problem with somebody being shacked up in a Hilton and an aggrieved being set on the side of the road.
Yeah. And, maybe she did push back at him, but he's pushing her up against the van. The 911 call
the reporter said something
he was
about
slapping her.
Yeah.
And they just went on their trip
and there's
the next day.
a proportionality thing, is, bigger, smaller in terms of physical size.
So, but even if the evidence the police got was that each of them had been hit, why are they not treating Gabby like a victim at all? Or why are they not treating him like a perpetrator at all?
And I'm with you on that, all right, because I think we're on the same page. But we get back to this point, well, what are police supposed to do then? You've got one van, you've got a male and a female involved in something. Yes, somebody called 911 with a version of events. Conflicting stories.
Yeah.
What are they supposed to do? Are they supposed to issue a police protection directive and say, here's a 12-month order?
Okay, that's a bit facetious.
Sorry.
If you're not sure what he's talking about, listen to the last episode we recorded. All right, so they then continued on their trip the next day, reconciled, continued, because that was on August the 12th. On August 27th, so we're very close to the time when Gabby was killed.
I'm thinking, after police did that and the relationship right after when they met up that first time, I wouldn't be surprised if he was, I don't know. I see him being angry after something like that.
Oh, 100%, which is so common, isn't it? Even though no charges were filed against either of them.
And it would have been her fault.
Of course. Then, August 27, a Louisiana couple who were vacationing in Wyoming said they saw these two people involved in a commotion as they were leaving the Merry Piglets Tex-Mex restaurant.
All right.
Never heard of that. So Gabby on this occasion was in tears. Brian was visibly angry, going in and out of the restaurant several times and showing anger towards the staff. The restaurant manager said she saw an incident but declined to give her name or describe what happened and said the restaurant did not have surveillance video of that incident. So we're seeing a little pattern here, in my opinion.
No, I'm with you on the fact that there's a pattern.
And if we come back to what she says happened, that he pushed her up against the side of the van, and I spoke earlier about that non-fatal strangulation, we're getting very close to that kind of conduct where, where is he pushing her? Where is he holding her to push her? If this is a predictor. Well,
it can be a predictor. I don't know for sure that that's what happened, but
no, I don't know either, but I'm saying we need to be so cognizant of this type of less obvious abuse. You know what I mean?
I'm with you with that. I'm still, we're going to have a discussion on choking and strangulation at some point because I think we're going to be at loggerheads on that one to some extent.
All right. So, her friend Rose said she hadn't been told about that fight where the police were called. But she had seen her that upset before because of him.
All right.
Her mum said that when she watched the police footage and heard the 911 call, she said, I watched my daughter looking frightened to death. That's when I realised that things were way worse than I could have imagined. And she couldn't believe the way the cops were laughing and joking around with Brian.
That's very dangerous.
It's so
ethical
scary.
Standards over here would have a field day with something, as they should. And the police officers should be investigated for that conduct.
Yeah, but I told you about the article I read about a police officer who was called to a domestic incident here. I think it was the Gold Coast even. And he accidentally called the victim on his mobile phone, like a butt dial. And she could hear him joking with his partner in the car as they left the scene of the domestic dispute and talking about her, the victim's breasts. And,
okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty intense.
So I hear things like that and I think we really need more training. But this was the part of the story that I focused on because what I think we can take from this is, we really, really need to continue working on awareness of what coercive control looks like in a relationship, accepting that insidious control sadly so often leads to these much worse outcomes. I
think it's a part of it. And I look at coercive control as being another variable under the umbrella of domestic violence.
Yes.
I really do. If we're starting to segregate certain avenues, that's fine, but it's domestic violence.
Yeah. Awareness and training for police.
No, and I'm with you on that. And that's why I think we've spoken about it previously, more training offline, one-on-one.
It's a huge thing. I know that, but it's
expensive,
an essential part.
You can't put a price on DV.
And then I think the reality of what our charge is going to look like, the reality of being able to prosecute coercive control.
Well, that's going to be, a feature that as a practitioner, it's going to be under the microscope.
You know what I'm worried about is that it will be an addendum charge. There'll be worse conduct and they'll say, and there is evidence of coercive control. But as a standalone charge on its own, I don't know that it's going to get to court.
I'm not sure. I'll be interested to see. I'll let you know if I see one.
Yeah, please do.
I think it's, I guess for a potential aggrieved, you would hope that there are other charges so that if that one standalone charge does not stick, there's something else there.
But so
I just don't know what
my
that is.
perspective is I want there to be that standalone charge because it might curtail the escalation
No,
to greater offences, you know?
And I think we can agree on that.
But I don't know how it's going to...
Well, sufficiency of evidence is going to be the stick-along part.
And
right?
I think the victims coming forward. Because they're in that love bubble kind of, you know, like not all victims, and I'm sure there will be some really brave victims who do come forward, but I think it's going to be hard.
Oh, I agree, 100%.
Just to finish it off.
Sure.
So the Petito Schmidt family, Gabby's family, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Brian's parents, and happily that was settled for $3 million.
Yeah.
In March
Brian's
2024.
Dad is lucky he's 16 hours away from me.
Wait till you hear about Brian's mum. According to FBI special agent, among his belongings at the house when they did the search was a letter that she had written, and it started, "Burn after reading. You are my boy. Nothing can make me stop loving you. Nothing will or could ever divide us, no matter what we do. If you are in jail, I will bake a cake with a file in it. If you need to dispose of a body, I will show up with a shovel and garbage bags."
She needs to be charged with something. They both do. The parents are disasters.
She was asked about that, and she said she was trying to connect with him and repair their relationship and had hoped this letter would remind him how much she loved him. So I'm going to go home and write some letters to my children.
No doubt, hey, and make sure we go to Bunnings and get a decent file.
Crazy. Gabby's parents have campaigned for new legislation to come in, and they have been successful. In spring 2024, the Domestic Violence Amendments Bill reformed lethality assessments in Utah, meaning the series of questions that determine whether someone in a domestic violence situation is at risk of being murdered, and then brought those to Florida. So there's been positive outcomes. And I always think of these victims whose families then take that tragedy and transform it into, you know, advocacy work.
Yes, helping others.
Like I think of Daniel Morgan's
parents. Yes, I was
parents.
just thinking of the Morgan Foundation,
and Hannah Clark's family. You know, so there is so much admiration for them. But anyway, so I just thought,
there's
interesting.
a lot in that one story.
There really is.
I mean, you have both physical, emotional, coercive control, the whole umbrella of domestic violence. You've got premeditation in terms of what happened after.
Mm-hmm.
You've got accessories. You have police investigation. And with the different jurisdictions, I'm sure that would have been a nightmare for them.
Oh, probably.
But also in the fact that the van was in the front yard. The dad accepted that the kid was in the house and nothing could be done.
And look, I don't want to take away the tragedy of Brian also being dead. I would prefer that he was alive and in prison. For
the rest of his life without the possibility of parole.
Yeah. Yes. So there you go.
Well, thank you very much. That was an interesting one for sure.
Thanks,
There's a lot in that. And we're not done with the coercive control stuff.
No, we're not.
We'll have to have further
Watch
chit-chats
this
about
space.
it. Watch it. TB continued.
Yes. Thanks, Jay.
You bet. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the episode. If you enjoyed it, please rate and review the podcast. If you're interested in clips, check out @Justice Matters Pod on TikTok and Instagram.